Excellent. Thank you so much. Let's give Beth a hand, everybody. Fantastic. That was awesome. Hey, props to y'all for your concentration, honestly. It was good stuff. Now, look, I know it may seem like it, but I promise you this was not a prank or a gimmick. When composer John Cage put pen to paper in 1952, that's what he wrote, or didn't write. He instructed musicians not to play their instruments throughout 3 movements, lasting a total of 4 minutes and 33 seconds. We spared y'all from the whole thing today. You're welcome. When asked about the piece, Cage said that it really wasn't about what the instrumentalists were doing or not doing. He said that it was just as much about what the audience was doing. Cage had a point he was out to prove. That absolute silence couldn't exist. Whether it was the sound of our breathing, a cough or a sneeze, or someone shifting in their seat, silence simply wasn't something that could be achieved, even for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. What's interesting is that Cage and his instrumentalists would have used a music term for that silence. Now, I have to admit, I'm drawing really hard on my middle school concert band knowledge here. But from what I understand, they would have counted in the beat or the tempo to this piece like any other piece of music. And they would have continued counting throughout its duration. But the term they would have used for what they were doing wasn't silence. It's another term for when you're waiting to begin playing or come back in after a pause. That term is rest. Funnily enough, that's what we're talking about today as we wrap up our I Choose series. And like silence, it often feels like we can never truly achieve rest. Not a pause in a musical symphony, but a break in the hustle and bustle of our busy lives. But just like purpose, love, peace, and freedom, we can choose rest, as impossible as that may seem to us. And it's not just that we can choose it, we must choose it. Having rest is a vital part of our spiritual lives, too. And we're going to talk about how we can do that today. But before we get there, we have to ask ourselves an important question. What is rest? Like, what does that actually mean? I'm an English major at heart, so I typically start looking for answers to questions like that in the dictionary. So here are a couple definitions I found for the word rest. We're literally going to read them. This is the verb form first. To cease work or movement in order to relax, refresh oneself, or recover strength. So that's the verb. Now we're going to look at the noun. An instance or period of relaxing or ceasing to engage in strenuous or stressful activity. I think we all kind of get the idea here, right? So now that we have a base common understanding, there's a rather convicting question we have to address. How many of us can honestly say that we find rest on a regular basis? Show of hands. Yeah, let me keep mine down, by the way. I figured very few of us. We really don't do this well. And there's even data to support this. Let's take sleep, for example. We often associate rest, or at least feeling well rested, with sleep. Most studies find that 7 to 9 hours of sleep is what's recommended for adults. That amount of sleep is critical for maintaining things like our cognitive function, mental health, our ability to fight off chronic illness. On the other hand, not getting enough sleep significantly diminishes our bodies in all of those areas. With that being said, about 33% of adults don't get enough sleep. They sleep less than the recommended 7 to 9 hours. Now, that may not seem like a big number in the grand scheme of things, but I want you to do something with me. I want you to look at the person to your left. Now look at the person to your right. One of the 3 of you isn't getting enough sleep. That's significant. Sleep is just one example, though. Vacation is another. A time that's literally meant for us to have a break, and we've turned it into something that's not that. Last year, some amazing friends of ours invited my wife, Abby, and I to go to Disney World. And it was an absolutely incredible trip and experience in so many ways. But in others, it was more like a sophisticated military operation than a vacation. Up at 0600, that's 6 a.m. if you don't know, sleep at 2300, 11 p.m. if you're lucky, 15 to 20,000 steps in between every day for 8 days straight. Oh, and the best part, here's the best part. I got sick the day before we left to go on the trip. Rested, not how I felt when we came home. In fact, part of me felt like I needed a vacation to recover from the vacation. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Whether it's sleep, vacation, or just taking breaks throughout our days and weeks, most of us do not know how to rest. And it just makes me wonder, why? Well, if you look around, there are plenty of reasons. Some of them are cultural and practical. For many of us, our jobs demand long hours to complete the tasks we're paid to do. Our economy, where it feels like everything gets more expensive by the day, means that we have to work hard to stay afloat. And there's other obligations outside of work, like spending time with our families and that endless to-do list around the house. Some days, a lot of days, it just feels like there's not enough time to get everything on our plates done. But we put our heads down and we try to accomplish that impossible task anyway. And that means there's no time to rest. Or maybe your reasons for feeling like you can't rest or don't know how are more internal. Maybe you've allowed the hustle culture we exist in to get to you. Consciously or not, you have bought into the idea that your worth is determined by your productivity. That if you're not working, then you're falling behind, or somebody else is surpassing you. That rest isn't an option for you. Maybe you feel guilt or shame for resting, like you haven't earned the opportunity to rest, especially if you feel like others around you are working harder than you are. Or maybe whether you're aware of it or not, you feel like you can't rest because you're chasing perfection. Like rest is what comes after all the work is completed, and you won't even allow it to cross your mind before then. Whatever our reasons are, we don't choose rest. But that's not what God had in mind for us. In fact, he modeled what it was supposed to look like himself. At the very beginning of time, God created everything, the heavens, the earth, and everything that inhabits the earth. And then, when he was done, on the seventh day, God had finished his work of creation, so he rested from all his work. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy because it was the day when he rested from all his work of creation. On the seventh day, God rested. Wow. On one hand, it makes me think God was literally creating everything that exists. That sounds like hard work, certainly harder than anything I have to do. If he can rest from that work, then certainly I can rest from mine. On the other hand, though, I'm thinking, he is God. Was that work even hard for him? Even if it wasn't, though, he rested anyway. Either way, I think there's a powerful lesson here for us. God valued rest. He modeled it, and he still does. Later in Exodus, the second book of the Bible, God reminds his people of the importance of rest as part of the rhythm of their lives. Remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath day of rest dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any work. This includes you, your sons and daughters, your male and female servants, your livestock, and any foreigners living among you. Now, if you read the Bible, particularly the Old Testament, which is the first of the two large sections the Bible is divided into, it won't be long until you run into something kind of like this. How does an ancient command like this one apply to our lives today? Remember the Sabbath, keep it holy, don't do any work. That seems pretty clear. In fact, it's one of the original 10 commandments. But here's where it gets complicated. What was considered work back then is radically different from work in our modern context now. According to ancient Jewish law, anything from tying a knot to drawing water from a well could have been considered work. They definitely were not thinking of 12-hour days working construction or 18-hour days typing data into spreadsheets. Our idea of what work is has only become more and more all-consuming, which makes taking an entire day from work or any of the things that drain us, it feels impossible in a 24/7, always connected world. However, I think in this scenario and others like it, what really matters is the spirit of the command. Instead of getting hung up on what qualified as work then versus what does now, or debating the validity of an entire day being set aside for rest, let's think about the central point of this command. That God's people were supposed to have time to rest as part of their life's rhythm, to honor him and obey his command. That was true for God's people in Exodus, and it's still true for God's people today. A core part of our spiritual lives has to be rest. So that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of our time together. Rest the way that God intended for us, why it matters, and how to implement it into the rhythm of our lives. I think there are a few core principles that we have to understand to be able to achieve this kind of rest. And we can find them directly from the words written in the Bible. For example, in the Psalms, Solomon, known as Israel's wisest ever king, he writes these words: "It is useless for you to work so hard from early morning until late at night, anxiously working for food to eat, for God gives rest to his loved ones." Like I mentioned earlier, for many of us, we feel like we have to earn the right to rest. Once we've accomplished all the things, outworked everybody, and feel good about ourselves, maybe then we can rest. But we were never supposed to approach it that way. Not only is rest supposed to be part of our normal rhythm, but it's also not something we can earn. Solomon writes that trying to do this is useless, and that God freely gives us rest. It's not contingent on anything we do ourselves. In other words, true rest is a gift from God. Think about it this way. What does your mom always say when you ask her what she wants for Mother's Day? Or for the moms out there, how do you respond when you're asked that question? There you go. Look, I bet it's something like this: peace and quiet, a nap, not having to cook any meals or do any dishes or clean up after anybody. Am I right? Am I on the right track? You just want, thank you, there we go, we got one. You just want one day a year where you don't have to worry about all those things. And it's considered a gift for you to receive some time like that. Well, what if I told you that God is offering that same kind of rest, except rather than one day a year as part of the normal rhythm of your life? In fact, it's not just an offer, it's a command. And it's not just for moms, dads, and kids, and everybody else out there. This is for you too. Time to put aside the dozens of things that need to be done, that are weighing on us, and that we can't rest until they're complete. Except that's exactly what we're supposed to do. You don't have to earn that. It's already offered to you, prescribed to you even. All you have to do is choose it. We're going to talk about some practical ways you can implement this kind of rest into your busy life a little bit later, but there are a couple more core principles about the rest God desires for us that we have to understand before we get there. As I've alluded to a few times already, one of the things that stops many of us from feeling like we can rest is that we feel like there's always something to do. So we feel like we simply can't rest because it would mean that we're not working when we need to be. But that was never what God intended for us, and King David knew this. He wrote about it in the most famous of the Psalms, where he said this: "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul." David was busy too. As the king of Israel, he was leading the people, fighting battles against their enemies, and securing their territory. I'm sure he felt like there was always something to do and no time to rest. But he knew that with God, he could find rest. And even if he wasn't able to do that on his own, God would ensure that he found the rest that he needed. Even the words, "He makes me lie down," point to this. In a modern translation like this one, it sounds a little bit forceful on God's part. However, in Hebrew, the original language that the Bible was written in, it's more like God invites us to lay down. We can do this too, and trust that all the things that have to get done will get done. And we can do it by accepting a truth that David learned, that God is working. God is always working, even when we're not. As much as we'd like to and as much as we try, we cannot always be working, but God can. He's always working for our good, and we can rest knowing that he's working on our behalf. Now, I know how it can sound when somebody like me stands on a platform like this and talks about a subject like this one. It can sound like I have it all figured out, like I have cracked the code and I'm here to impart my infinite wisdom about how to do this to you. But let me assure you, I struggle with this just like you do. A couple weeks ago, I had a really long day. It started with a morning workout, which I like to get my brain and my body moving, and then it was just all the things. A million emails, dozens of tasks to complete, multiple meetings, so on and so forth. I finally got home a little bit after 8. I put my stuff down, I took a shower, set everything up for the following day, and I was just getting ready to relax for a little while before going to sleep when I saw it. I just happened to walk by our kitchen sink with a few dirty dishes in it, and I just couldn't help it. I let out an audible and obnoxious sigh. It was like, oh, like that, like one of those, right? So my wife, Abby, she couldn't help but notice the world's loudest recorded exhale, and she was like, I better go over there and make sure he's okay. And look, this is much more about how kind she is and how desperately I needed pity. But she said, I got this. You've had a long day. Go relax. I like to think that God wants something similar for us. I got this. Go relax. He doesn't want us to live each day in the fog of all the things on our plates, stumbling from one thing to the next without relief. He wants us to have rest. And if we're going to embrace that, we have to admit something to ourselves, that we can't do it all. No matter how much we want to or how much we try to, we simply cannot do it all. But like I've been saying this whole time, we're not supposed to. This is really about knowing our limits and our place, that our capacity isn't infinite. We have limits, but we know a God who doesn't. And because he is infinite, he is limitless, and he is all-powerful, we submit our lives to him and his will for us. And that will includes rest. Not just for the purpose of having a break, but also for recognizing and honoring who he is. Another famous psalm says it like this: Be still and know that I am God. I will be honored by every nation. I will be honored throughout the world. The formula for us to enjoy the rest that God offers us and wants for us, it's right here. We have to start by being still. It's simply impossible for us to find the rest we're seeking if we continue at the pace we're always running. Now, I'm not saying you have to completely drop everything, and I know that's not even possible in a lot of cases. What I am saying is that we have to have time dedicated to rest, to relax, refresh, and recover our strength. When we commit to doing that, then we can get to the second part of this formula, knowing that God is God. It's not just about getting your second wind, though that is important. It's also about having the time and the capacity to be aware of how God is moving in your life and how he's with you as you navigate all the things happening in it. The writer of Hebrews talks about it this way. So there is a special rest still waiting for the people of God. For all who have entered into God's rest have rested from their labors, just as God did after creating the world. The kind of rest that's described here is true rest, the kind that refreshes our bodies and our minds, but also reinvigorates our souls. So, we've talked about rest as God intended it and why we need it. But how do we get it? How do we actually implement it into the regular rhythm of our lives? Before we leave, I want to give you some ways that you can begin to build this into your rhythm. Before we get into them, though, let me say this. I don't know each and every one of you. I don't know your life and all the complexities it has. I don't know all the things you have to balance and everything you have going on that makes it hard for you to rest. So these may work for you, or you may need to take them and adjust them. This is just a place to start if you're stuck. Which leads me pretty well into another disclaimer, and I alluded to this earlier. I do not have all the answers. Historically, I have not been great at rest. In fact, when I was given this topic to speak about today, I chuckled out loud. But in a way, it makes me feel better about getting up here and talking about it, because we're all in this together trying to figure out how to do it well. So, what I'm about to tell you are some ideas for how to build rest into your routine. I'm trying to implement them and adjust them in a way that works for me, and hopefully it'll be useful for you to do the same. So, here's the first one. Schedule your rest. That's right, schedule it. Literally put it on your calendar, your planner, your whiteboard at home, a sticky note, whatever your system is. The point is that you plan when you're going to rest and you plan it ahead of time. I'm embarrassed to say this was kind of a mind-blowing idea for me when I first heard it, because it shouldn't be. If your life is anything like mine, everything else gets scheduled out. Time for exercise, for meetings and tasks, date nights, group hangouts, and more. You know, everything else gets scheduled. Everything. So why wouldn't we schedule when we're going to rest in between all that stuff? I try my best to do this in my own life. We have Fridays off around here, but Abby works. So to the best of my ability, I try to block off that day to have some time to rest when she's gone. And it doesn't always go like that. Sometimes I have to catch up on work that I didn't finish during the week or something like that. But more often than not, that time is scheduled for rest. Before we move on, let me say this. I know not everybody here can schedule several hours or half a day solely dedicated to rest. And if that's you, you may be thinking that's just not realistic for you. But if that doesn't work for you, it doesn't have to be that much time. What matters is that you schedule whatever time you can for rest. So whether it's an evening, an hour, or even a few minutes, having some time to rest built into your schedule is better than no time at all. If you need help scheduling this, it just so happens that we have a one-day spiritual retreat coming up next month. Pastor Beth Stoddard will be there to help you get the rest and rejuvenation you're looking for. So you can head to our website to find out more about that if you're interested. Once you've scheduled time to rest, the next thing you got to do is be intentional. I'm not sure why, but for a long time, I thought rest meant doing absolutely nothing. And if I exerted myself or inconvenienced myself in any way, then it was disqualified. That time could no longer be considered rest. Now, this became a little bit of a tension after my wife and I got married because I decided I was going to do our laundry on Fridays when I was at home and she was at work. But then I was conflicted. Like, was I actually resting if I was doing laundry? So what would end up happening is essentially no man's land. I would get the clothes washed and dried, but not folded. So I rested some, and I did laundry some, but didn't feel like I had completed either one. Speaking of Beth, I was talking through this with her one day, and she just said, it sounds like you'd feel more rested if you just folded the laundry and completed the task. Yeah, she was totally right. I could not allow my brain to truly rest until that task was completed. Now look, maybe complete inactivity is what you need for rest, but that's probably not true for most of us. So you can be intentional with your rest by spending time completing the things that are weighing on your mind. The laundry, grocery shopping, getting an oil change, fixing that broken thing in your house, because we all have at least one thing broken in our house. Rest can look like all of those things and more. Now, let me be clear. That doesn't mean you have to complete the list. You have to get everything done before you can rest. But it might be the case that you need to remove one or two of those obstacles from your path before you can get the most out of your rest. Because with those things hanging over your head, you're never going to be able to feel truly rested. The last one is to set boundaries. Once you've scheduled your time to rest and decided how you're going to be intentional about it, do not compromise on it. We all have a million different things that demand our attention, and they all fight for the limited time we have. So something will come along and tempt you to give up the time you've scheduled to rest. It's up to you to protect it, because only you can prioritize the rest that you need. That might mean not going to do something you want to get the rest you know that you need. It might mean telling friends or even family no. It'll be a hard choice. But when the people in your life get the best version of you because you prioritized rest, it'll be worth it. Rest is critical because all of us run at a breakneck pace, and we need to be refreshed and rejuvenated from it. But it's even deeper than that, because true rest, the kind that God modeled and intended for us, it's about our posture and our perspective. On the seventh day of creation, God rested and looked at all he had done. And he wants us to do the same. If we never rest, we'll never be intentional about seeing how God is moving all around us. So, if you've had a hard time making space for that, here's your opportunity. We're going to take just a couple of minutes to sit back, take a deep breath, and rest. There's going to be a timer on the screen counting the time down, and then we'll sing one more song together before we finish for today. Take advantage of this time. I know everybody here has things to run off to after this, but stay in this moment just a little longer. And don't let this be idle time. Instead, actively reflect on how God has been with you and how his presence is all around you.
don't want to rush on ahead in my own strength when you're right here. Lord, I don't want to rush on ahead in my own strength when you're right here. I'm not in a hurry when it comes to your spirit, when it comes to your presence, when it comes to your voice. I'm learning to listen, just to rest in your nearness. I'm starting to notice you are speaking. Lord, I want to love like you. I want to feel what you feel. I want to see what you see. Lord, I want to love like you. I want to feel what you feel. I want to see what you see. I'm not in a hurry when it comes to your spirit, when it comes to your presence, and when it comes to your voice. I'm learning to listen, just to rest in your nearness. I'm starting to notice you are speaking. I'm not in a hurry when it comes to your spirit, when it comes to your presence, when it comes to your voice. I'm learning to listen, just to rest in your nearness. I'm starting to notice you are speaking. Open my eyes, I want to see you. Open my ears, I want to hear you speak. Tell me your thoughts and what's on your mind. I'll be your friend. I want to see through your eyes. I want to see through your eyes. I'm not in a hurry when it comes to your spirit, when it comes to your presence, when it comes to your voice. I'm learning to listen, just to rest in your nearness. I'm starting to notice you are speaking. When it comes to your presence, when it comes to your voice, I'm learning to listen, just to rest in your nearness. I'm starting to know that you are speaking.
Just as much as love or peace or freedom or purpose, rest is critical to your life and your relationship with Jesus. I hope you will find a way and prioritize rest and then guard that time as the precious time it is. Because when you rest, it'll help you not only be rejuvenated, but it'll also help you hear from God, who's trying to help you become the person you were always meant to be. If you need help doing any of that, please reach out. Click the link in the chat right now you can send an email to me where I'd love to talk with you and hear about how God is teaching you to rest. Until then, we will see you next week for a brand new series. Bring a friend, and we'll see you both then.